Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's episode of Catholic ReCon, Testimonies from Reverts and Converts. I'm your host, Eddie Trask. This week's guest is a colleague and a friend, Taylor Kemp, who is a Catholic convert, and he played for DC United professional soccer for, I believe, over 6 years, right, Taylor?
That is correct, yep.
Right on. And he's one of the most competitive people I've ever met. He's also the director of Formed, which is a Catholic streaming platform from the Augustine Institute. I'm sure we'll get a little bit more into that. But Taylor, thank you for being here. Thank you for, when I was reading about some of your story, what struck me was how exposed you were to the secular world. And I'm sure you'll get into that as it weaves into the story. But why don't you help everyone understand from the beginning how this all started?
Yeah. Well, let's see. It's always a question of where one should begin in a story like this one, because conversion and is a mysterious thing. It kind of transpires over months and years. But let's see. So my background is I'm from Denver, Colorado. As you said, really soccer was my life. I didn't grow up particularly religious. My parents, we would go to a non-denominational Christian church once or twice a year, but the faith was not a part of my home life, to say the least. And my life was really about, trying to be a good person generally, playing soccer, and that was kind of the gist of it. And so I was a very good player in high school. I went to the University of Maryland to play college soccer there, which they were the reigning national champions. I was an All-American. Was the number 2 player coming out of high school. I had been with the, with the U18 and U20 U.S. men's national teams. So I had traveled all over the world. I'd gone to South America, Central America, and Europe as a very young man for that, and went to the University of Maryland. Was the team captain junior and senior year. I left early to enter the 2013 MLS draft. I was selected in the first round by DC United, and then I had a 6-year career there. Played in I was blessed to play in over 100 games, played in over 10 countries, across 4 continents. Was with the full U.S. men's national team in 2017. And then right in the middle of that, when I was about 24, and then when I was 25, I ended up entering the church at the Easter Vigil in 2016. I had a very powerful, life-changing conversion, changed a lot about me. Absolutely fell in love with the faith, fell in love with the Lord. And then in his providence started having injuries, and I ended up having about 16 months of injuries and a couple surgeries, and it was very clear that in 2018, it was coming to an end. And so I retired at the end of 2018. I was already a student at the Augustine Institute graduate school. I was a distance ed student just because of how much I discovered a deep love for theology. And then after I retired, came back to Denver, which is where the Augustine Institute is. And my wife, we had gotten married in the middle of that. My wife and I were both from here, knew we wanted to come back to Denver. So I finished up my degree. Started teaching on the side just for fun, volunteering at the parish level, and working with a lot of different groups. And I found a love of teaching, and then applied and was hired for the Denver Catholic Biblical School for a period of time. And then COVID hit, and like so many others, the jobs were just cut in half. They lost almost half their students. And then I was very fortunate to still have some contact with some of the professors at the Augustine Institute. And that's how I ended up working at Formed under Dr. Ben Akers, which has just been one of the great blessings of my life. So that's where I still am. It's where I'm coming to you from today, is the Augustine Institute, as you know, Eddie. So that's the summarized quick version.
Wow. All right. See you later, Taylor. That was good. No. Okay. So you're 24, 25, your childhood, you have some memory of non-denominational churches. Mm-hmm. What the heck happened in high school and early college and through those years that led you to the Catholic faith?
Yeah. So I had been dating for a long time, the woman who would become my wife. And I had some deep moral failures in college and in young adulthood. that I hurt her tremendously, and I loved her deeply, obviously very imperfectly. And I was confronted with how much I could hurt someone that I really cared about, but was obviously very careless with. But it was kind of seeing how deeply I hurt her, Brittany, that I was confronted with the question of like, I've gotten off the rails here. Like I've gotten some stuff wrong along the way. I was a very confident young man. I was very successful academically and athletically. And so I had a lot of confidence in how I was going about life. And I didn't think I needed much else. I certainly didn't think I need God. I didn't even readily listen to other people all that much because I was like, look, things are going pretty well. But then when I saw what I had done to her and how much it tore her up, and as her and I tried to kind of put the pieces of our relationship back together on our own, and like it didn't work, it just kept failing, and we were just tearing each other apart. That put me into a place where I was like, I definitely got some stuff wrong. In that process, my now wife, but at the time girlfriend, Brittany, she was a cradle Catholic, not super faithful, but would go to mass on Sundays, but wasn't going to confession, wasn't living according to the life of the church at all by any means, but was retaining a hold on her Catholic faith. And when her and I were going through this period of like pain and struggle and trying to fix what I had broken, she was like, look, I think we need God. And I was like at a place, because I had been so humbled by my own actions, that I was like very reluctantly willing to say like, all right, fine, like I'll give this a shot. So she really kind of pushed me into RCIA, and so this would have been in the fall of 2015. So actually I was 25 when all of this really began. So this was the fall of 2015. She gets me into RCIA. And then, like I said, I was pretty reluctant, but I go into RCIA and I have like, yeah, I mean, it's worth talking about. I have the most unbelievable experience that nothing that I expected at all. So I'll pause there before going into that. Yeah.
I'm curious. Okay, obviously your wife, cradle Catholic. You have some exposure. When I think of non-denominational, because that's where my wife and I were as well, even though I was raised Catholic for 10 years, we were there. It's quite a leap. I mean, it depends on how people view it. For me, it was quite a leap to go from kind of this very modern approach to Christianity and leapfrog hundreds of years of Christian history to come to anything that resembles the Catholic Church. So did you go through that process, or when you say you're desperate, you're like, my wife's awesome, I think I'll go to RCIA?
Yeah, I would say my struggles were probably different than a lot of people's who technically came from a non-denominational, because I wasn't really a believer. Like I wouldn't have said I didn't believe in God, but I just didn't. It didn't matter to me at all. So, like there were no doctrinal issues for me at all, because I didn't even know what Christianity believed. So it wasn't that. But when I started going to mass with her, I was very thrown off by the mass, because it's like so structured. You're standing, you're sitting, you're like the same prayers. So it made me very uncomfortable. Like for someone who, I liked to like be in some level of control, and I didn't like to feel like I wasn't in the know of what was going on. And I didn't like to feel out of place, certainly. And the mass made me feel that for sure at the beginning. So when I started going, I really did not like it. So the jump for me was not doctrinal. It wasn't like church history. I didn't even know the history stuff at all. Like it wasn't Mary, it wasn't the saints. I didn't have any of that. I didn't even know what a saint was.
It's almost like a blank canvas for you.
No, it really was, which in many ways was a blessing, because I didn't have to battle against a lot of the intellectual stuff that I know so many others have, that I know you did in your conversion. Like I didn't have that. For me, it was like I was coming, it was almost like closer to like a paganism than Christianity. It was a worldview that was like, put your life, you can create a good life for yourself and you don't need anything else. That was the implicit worldview that I grew up with. So for me, the biggest struggle was to accept that like I am not autonomous in my life, like that I don't get to set the agenda on my life anymore. Like accepting that God has a will for my life and that the best thing I can do is follow that. That was like hard for me to let go, because my identity was wrapped up in being a soccer player. So I'm thinking like, well, what if he takes that away? And I'm like, I've worked way too hard for too long. Like, I'm not going to give that over to him. Like, so it was more that, it was almost the weirdness of Catholicism, was like the biggest problem I had. I was like, I don't want to be labeled a Catholic because I thought Catholics were very strange. Yeah.
So then you enter RCIA, and obviously, well, I shouldn't say obviously, because I didn't have to go through that because, again, I was raised Catholic. My wife did. Now, when she joined, there was that period of inquiry.
Mhm.
Now, I don't know this. I should probably know this, but is that what all people go through? Was that the first thing where you went in saying, "Hey, I'm just going to test this"?
Yes.
You know what I mean? At that point, it's not like you said, you were still kind of resistant. So of course you're going to go.
Yeah, I went in because when Brittany explained that RCI was like whatever it is, 7 or 8 months, I was like, you know what? I'm just going to go for a little bit for like a month or two and then drop out. I was like, that'll appease her and that'll be fine. So that was kind of my plan going in. So yeah, I was going in basically because I had to. I wasn't super open-minded and was planning on not seeing it through. That was just like my internal dialogue. Obviously what happened was a very different story. So we were at St. Peter's on Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C., and we were blessed there to, the DRE at the parish knew some of the Dominicans at the Dominican House of Studies, and they actually taught our RCIA program. So Father Thomas Joseph White was our teacher, and he is now the rector of the Angelicum in Rome. He's an amazing theologian, and I didn't know any of that, but he was our teacher. And so like day one of RCIA, it's September in Washington, D.C., which it's like blazing hot. We go into the basement, like gathering room of St. Peter's. It's got to be over 80 degrees in this room. There's like no air conditioning. There's peeling yellow wallpaper on the wall. There's a picture of Pope Francis, a poster that says "Porn kills love." There's like a stack of catechisms, which is a word I had never heard in my life. And I'm like sitting in the back, and I'm also like, I'm like a tier 3 celebrity in DC. Like I'm not at all like, but like a lot of people knew who I was because I was playing for their team. And I'm sitting there like, oh my gosh, somebody's going to recognize me here. This is humiliating. Like, I hate this. Wow. And then in walks Father Thomas Joseph, and he's a Dominican priest. I had never seen anybody but a parish priest, a diocesan priest, in like the black clerics. And Father Thomas Joseph walks in. He's got his white robe. He's got beads hanging. I'm like, what is this? Like, what am I doing? Like, I leaned over to Brittany. I'm like, Brittany, is he a priest? And she's like, I think so, but I don't really know. So like this guy walks in what looks like to me like a bed sheet, and he's like, I could not get over how comical looking back the first session was. So I'm furious in session 1, thinking I just got to get out of this. And then Father Thomas Joseph was just the best teacher I had ever seen. Like he's incredibly smart, like he's incredibly gifted intellectually, but what made the biggest impression on me is his charity, truly. Because I would just watch this man like week after week just get peppered with questions. Some of them are coming from a hostile place. Some of them are like, you get it all there. And it was a big class. It was like 20, 25 people. And he's just getting peppered with these questions. And like some of them, you could tell people had a lot behind them. Like they're carrying all their baggage and they're throwing it at him. And this man, like, he just like received it so gently and would respond so thoughtfully and like compassionately, and he would meet with people after class. And so honestly, my like initial kind of on-ramp into the faith that kind of opened my heart in a significant way had nothing to do with the content of what he was saying. It had everything to do with like the witness that he was giving of, I was like, this man is able to do something that I've never seen somebody else do. Like he was so comfortable in who he was. He was not threatened, and he genuinely wanted to just help people. That was it. Like he had no agenda of defending himself or the church. He just spoke to people. And I remember just looking at him after, like, this was week 3 or 4, being like, man, like he has something I want. I might not have articulated it that way, but I just was like fascinated by him. So it was really his witness that opened my heart. It wasn't any argument. I didn't even know what they were really talking about for a while. So I would say he really convinced me to give it a real shot. Like, because I saw in him something that I wanted. I was like, wow, he's perfectly comfortable in who he is as this habited Catholic priest, basically receiving like years of anger that some people had towards the church. And he just did it in like a very tender fashion, that also like exuded like real strength. And it made a tremendous impression on me.
Now, were you open about that early on with Brittany, or were you still kind of, hey, I'm not going to show my cards here, so let's see how this goes. I'm going to keep looking into this. Yeah.
Yes. No, it wasn't until halfway through that I think Brittany even realized anything was happening in me. So no, this was just all interior. I was not in a place where I could like speak into that or even wanted anyone else to know, because I thought it was just so preposterous that even admitting to myself that I really thought there was something there was something I was not in a place to do.
Now, was anyone in on this, like even family, close family? So no one really knew that you were pursuing Catholicism. It was kind of this secret between you and your wife for a while. Yeah,
very much so. Which was really difficult. Conversion's so hard because, especially with family, I would say like most of my family, they're not Catholic or really, very religious at all. And it's a difficult thing because your heart's being changed by God. You're not really able to give words to what is happening. It's very mysterious, and you don't really have a grip on it for a while. And so there's a sense where it's like, I can't even talk to other people about this because I don't know what's really going on in me yet. Like things are changing and I'm seeing things a new way, but I've never grappled with this. So I don't know how to articulate it. So yeah, I kept it like very secret, in a very real sense, which made it actually very difficult, I would say, for my family in particular. Fast forward like a year, 2 years, because I had changed so substantially, but that was largely hidden from them. So it was hard for them to understand, and it was hard for me to say. So yeah, conversion, it's just, it's a mystery. It's like a divine work and a human work brought it together, and it's difficult for people to know you one way and then now you're different.
Yeah, I had one of the first interviews, if I'm not mistaken, this gentleman said that's the one thing he regrets, is that he kept everything hidden because he was so concerned about how it would be viewed, and he didn't want them to be along for the journey, even though he didn't even know what, he was only at step 1, and he's just like, no, I don't want to deal with this. And I've actually heard that from a few other people. So I think it depends on the situation, of course, but in general, those things that are fearful, I think we'd all say, let's just go for it and bring people along for the ride so they can see as you change, as you're getting closer to the sacraments or learning about the sacraments. And by virtue of that, you are getting closer. So, yeah.
And there are times where I look back and I'm like, I regret how hidden I was, but then I'm also like, I don't know if I could have done it any other way, because it's just such an interior journey. And I think there was an implicit sense in me that knew that it wasn't going to be super well received by certain people, friends and family. And so I was just like, I can't let them know, because I think that they'll they'll have opinions that I'm just not ready to even field. Like you're trying to just grapple with it on your own. So I do look back and I'm like, man, I really wish I would have let other people come along that with me. But like when I look back as honestly as I can, at least for me, I'm like, I don't know if I could have done it another way.
Got it. Yeah. If you have enough going on and trying, like you said, it's all this mystery is starting to occur within you, just crashing upon you. And then you say, okay, let me invite other people in. That could be a disaster as well. So, yeah.
Yeah. And then in this process, so like I'm changing for sure interiorly. I'm hearing Father Thomas Joseph. I'm starting to get more and more convinced that at least there's something really worth considering here. But the other mysterious divine thing is Brittany and I started healing. Like it just started happening. And we had tried to basically work it out for like 5 months on our own before I ended up in RCIA. And then all of a sudden we started like communicating more honestly, like more clearly, like really being able to hone in on what had happened and why. And that, because healing, reconciliation is a divine thing. It's something we participate in. So I believe God was pouring his grace out on us. But the other thing was in RCI, like we're learning about what is sin, where does it come from, like what is the fall. So we were actually given a vocabulary to understand our own actions. Like that's where like Holy Mother Church is so wise, and she understands human beings perfectly in her teachings. And so we were all of a sudden receiving like a vocabulary and a way of looking at the past 2 years of our life, and then being able to make sense of it in a way that we could actually move on a little bit. Not move on, but like really look at what had happened, address it, ask for forgiveness, offer forgiveness, and go forward. And so we started healing, which was it was just an amazing time of life, really.
Yeah, I've heard a few people talk about they've eventually told someone that was skeptical, but they were a little bit open. Just believe it or not, open the catechism and start reading.
Yeah.
And don't jump around, just start reading. And I've had that come up a few times. I thought that was so amazing. And it speaks to your point about the vocabulary. Like, let's go back to the basics. Just like, don't open the Bible and just flip around and think you're going to make sense of the greater story just by proof texting, Yeah.
So. And find a guide, because find someone who is living a life that you respect and admire. And if you're converting, find someone who's living a good, faithful Catholic life, because they'll help you, like they'll help break those things down too. Because that's what Father Thomas Joseph did. Like mystagogy, like the term, it's to lead into the mystery. And I really do think it's so important when we're going through those periods to find people who have been through it already, and they can help you understand it and be a guide. And the catechism is a guide, and we need to find people in our life. This is why like evangelization happens person to person. Find people who have been there. That doesn't mean you have to become who they are. It doesn't even mean you have to listen or take in exactly everything they say. But I'm grateful that during this period, there was Father Thomas Joseph, who is like my formal teacher, but there were also friends that we made who like, I could talk about these things with them, and they were like, yeah, like I too have experienced that. And this is how, like, it just gives you a heading. And it was really helpful. And I think as Catholics now, like we need to be willing to try to encounter people to say like, I'm happy to come along with you in this.
Yeah, agreed. Anything else that happened during RCIA that you want to talk about as you're getting further and further down the road?
Yeah, well, no, it was just an incredible process. By the time I came into the Easter Vigil, I was all in by that point. Like it had been that 7 or 8 months. I was all in, and I remember going into the Easter Vigil thinking like, I really don't know what all of this is about. Like, I don't know even fully what I think about Jesus Christ. I don't know exactly what I think about the church. I don't know exactly what I think about the saints or merit, like all of these things that had been talked about. But I just remembered being like, my heart was enough there that I was like, I don't know what all this is, but I can spend the rest of my life figuring it out.
Wow.
And I was like, I'm in. Like, I'm totally in. And so I felt like I didn't I knew enough to say, like, I believe. I knew enough to say, like, yes, I'm willing to give myself over to this, but that I didn't feel like I understood all the implications of that. But I was to the point where I was like, yeah, that's why I have the rest of my life.
Yeah. Yeah. Reason after the leap of faith and the ascent to truth. That's the other thing I think that other people have mentioned in RCIA. What they're learning is, okay, a lot of skeptics want to focus on the minutia. Okay, what did you mean by that?
Yeah.
And other people, when they start to see, they just say, oh, this is all truth.
Yeah.
And I don't have to articulate at this moment beyond the fact that this is truth.
Yeah.
I feel it in my soul. I've never felt this way. I've heard that from people as well. I never knew.
Yeah.
They didn't know that they were seeking objective truth, and they found it. That's what's so amazing to me.
Yeah. And there's a teaching of the church that says, like, our intellect was created to grasp truth. And I remember when I was at the graduate school here learning about that, and then I reflecting back on RCIA, there really was something where, like, I was receiving this teaching that I didn't fully get, but there was something you're like, that's true. Like, I don't get it, but it's true.
Yeah.
And that's when I was like, oh my gosh, that's what that is. Like, our intellects are created to grasp truth. And there was something of that going on. Like, you're hearing these things and you're like, okay, there's a lot of questions. There's, Newman has that famous saying, 1,000 questions don't make a single doubt. And it was like all these questions were spiraling, but at the same time, you could look at what was being presented and you're like, yeah, that's right. That's right.
That's great. That's great. Well, thank you for that. That's a phenomenal story. And I'm sure it just continues. Like you said, conversion, it's a lifelong process. Anything that has happened recently? I mean, you have a new baby in the family, right? Yeah.
Yes. Yep. We have a 6-month-old. Her name is Leonie, and then we have a 2-year-old named Agnes. But, I think the other significant piece is, so I was converting. It was in the middle of playing professional soccer. That was very difficult in many ways. Like, the locker room is very secular. And like I said, like, people know you one way, all of a sudden you're different. You talked a certain way. Now you're talking a different way. You were doing certain things. Now you're not doing them anymore. And your friends are kind of like, what's the deal? And that was hard. Like, that was really hard in the locker room. Because the locker room, you rely so much on very close relationships. So it brought a lot of tension and struggle. And eventually most of the stories came out really profound and really beautiful, but it was difficult. But one of the biggest things is my whole life had been built upon being a soccer player. That was my goal. That's where I'd gotten. A lot of my value was derived from that. And I had a terrible fear of that coming crashing down. Most of the time I was a professional player. You're worried about getting hurt. You're worried about someone else taking your spot. You're worried about losing your contract. You're worrying about losing your sponsorship, like all this stuff. And as I was converting and discovering, like, my value is in God, all of a sudden, a lot of that started to fade away. And it gave me just a tremendous joy and freedom in playing soccer that I really hadn't experienced since I was maybe in high school. Like, it had been a long time. And all of a sudden I really loved soccer again. And I ended up playing some of my best soccer after conversion for that very reason. So I don't want to present that it was like I converted and then God, like, made me better. That was not the case. I converted, and because my identity was found in the Lord, I no longer was so afraid of failure. That gave me a freedom to play better. So, like, more of my potential came out. So I had the best year of my career. That's when I was called in for the World Cup qualifying camp going into 2017. And then at the end of 2017, I had a really small injury. This was in August, and had surgery, was supposed to recover. 6 months later, still hadn't recovered, had another terrible injury, got more MRI scans, realized, like, I had a career-ending injury in my hip, had a major surgery, and it was all over after that. And people always ask, like, was that really hard? And of course there were elements of it that were difficult, but by the time, like, I announced my retirement to the team, it came as like a welcome friend. Like, it was, I was looking more at, like, I wonder what God's going to do with my life now. And I'm ready to go on. And I'm so grateful for how he took me out of soccer, because it wasn't like like something happened, it was over. It was like this 15-month process. And he worked in my heart to such a degree that by the time I like said goodbye, it was like I could just look back and like this was good, and I'm ready, which I'm very grateful for. But the big thing that I've always taken away from that is like God's providence is so mysterious, and his plans are not our plans. And my life is far better now than it ever was before. And I would have never thought that. And it came through struggle and difficulty and all different kinds of things. But it's always instilled in me this great trust that the plan that he has for our lives is far better than the plan that we have. And when we're in those periods of struggle and darkness and difficulty and the unknown, it's like, just keep going. Like he's going to take care of you, and he's going to push you because he wants us to grow in faith, hope, and charity. And it's always instilled a great confidence in me, in reflecting on how he's taken care of me and Brittany and our family. And knowing that whenever I hit those periods of darkness, it's like he'll take care of us, and he's going to ask me to grow, and it's going to hurt, but he'll always take care of us.
Well said, Taylor. You want to spend a few minutes talking about what you're doing now, maybe a little bit of what Formed is for those that don't know? I just find that so fascinating, and what you guys are doing to reach many, many people.
Yeah, so Formed, it's a Catholic streaming platform run by the Augustine Institute, and Formed is video and audio content, primarily video, but it's built and designed, and our goal is to serve the church. It's to nourish and build Catholic culture. So we do that by providing faith formation content for parishes and individuals. We have series on the sacraments and Bible studies. We have saint movies to give you an alternative to watching Netflix, so that you can learn about Mother Teresa and John Paul II and St. Francis of Assisi. We create a lot of kids content because the domestic church is so important, and it matters what your kids watch, and it matters just how they spend their time. And so we're trying to create content that enables kids to not be entertained, but be built up in their faith and in their knowledge of the things that are good, and to build good habits. We are creating content to serve parents, to help them have resources so that they can more fully integrate the faith at home. We have daily reflections to take people through scripture. We have faith-based conversations about all different kinds of topics. So Formed is built to serve, to be a resource for the church at all levels, from parishes, dioceses, kids, parents, the whole gamut. And so that's our goal. We're continuing to improve, trying to continue to improve. So if anybody's listening, just Google form.org. That'll teach you a bit about it. Watch.form.org is how you would actually get onto the platform, but check to see if your parish already has a subscription. So you can go to signup.form.org, type in your zip code, and see if your parish already has a subscription. If they do, you get in for free, and you have access to everything. So I've been working for Formed now for a little over 2 years. Formed was actually part of my faith formation when I was converting. And it's a joy to be working in developing content that can help and keep strengthening what we hope is a great resource for the church.
Awesome. Anything else you want to add, Taylor?
No, it's great to be on.
Yeah.
It's a joy to reflect on the work of God in our lives. So it was a joy.
Amen. Amen. Thanks again. And what stuck with me is how you described the first day of RCIA. I don't think that gets discussed a lot for someone that has no understanding of what they're about to walk into. You see the beads, you see a certain wardrobe, you see things on the walls. You're like, what is going on here? But very, very good. Taylor, thank you, everyone. Please share the video, subscribe, like, comment, etc., etc. Until next time, take care and God bless. Bye.